All right, so good evening, everyone. Welcome to NAMI North Texas's monthly meeting for March 2022. I am Chris, the Director of Programs here at NAMI North Texas. A couple of housekeeping and announcements to go over before we hand it over to our speaker for this month, which is Heather Bianchi, one of our newest board members and a expert when it comes to autism and children. So I will be handing off to her in a few minutes. We're going to go ahead and go through the general announcements for things that have been happening in the last month, things that will be happening this month, and things that will be happening in the next coming months. So first of all, when it comes to programs, our spring classes are well underway for the most part. We've got a few classes that are still yet to kick off, and they will be kicking off later this month. But for the most part, we have classes underway, both in person and virtual. We are hoping that in the summer, we will be able to offer more classes in person as we are coming out of what looks like the dark ages when it comes to COVID. That's yet to be seen, but let's keep our fingers crossed on that. And going forward and kind of resuming our everyday normal. So hopefully we'll have a lot more folks who are able to come out and come to in-person classes, facilitate in-person classes, et cetera. If that's something that you have done in the past and you would like to start doing again, go ahead and let me know. My email will be a couple of emails that will be at the end of the presentation. Support groups are also going well and strong. We've got our two big support groups, our family support group and our Connections Recovery Support Group. Both of them are meeting very well. Again, same thing. We've got some that are virtual and some that are in person, hoping that we'll be able to have more in-person groups going forward into the summer. With those groups and classes, we've updated our mask policy for those classes and groups so that people can start actually going and attending those classes and having the option of wearing a mask. All that is obviously dependent on CDC recommendations, local government restrictions, and local government mandates, et cetera. We will keep you updated on all of those. What that also means that we are going to be participating in a lot more events. And as such, we are getting a lot more speaker events and speaker requests and having a lot more activities that are going on out and away from the actual office instead of sitting here and doing a Zoom call every 5 minutes. So with that, you will probably be seeing a lot more updates coming along about events that we've got planned, things that we'll be doing out in the community, out at your local neighborhood, out at your school, out at your church, out at your library, et cetera. So be on the lookout for us. If you see us, say hi. We'll wave back. All right. One of our big programs that we will be launching this month is our Overwatch peer support program. That will be launching on March the 18th, which is not this Friday coming up, but I believe the Friday after that. If my math serves me correctly, I did not do math in school, so I am not good at it. But that will be coming up very shortly, where we will be providing peer support for law enforcement officers, corrections officers, and dispatchers, and then expanding those services to eventually be all-encompassing for all first responders and frontline healthcare workers as a response to NAMI National's Frontline Wellness Initiative that was put out in 2020. So that is our big thing with our ops program and all of our programs. We also have one big event coming up. I believe it's in May. And for that, I have Haley DeWolf, who is our outreach coordinator or event coordinator, I should say, to talk to you about our NAMI Walks. So Haley, you want to go ahead and let people know about the Walks and what we're going to be doing this year?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Thursday. The weather was so great today. I don't know about you guys, but I hope you guys got some time in the sun. And speaking of some great weather and being outdoors, we are going to be in person walking at the Frisco Rough Riders Stadium this year once again for our NAMI Walks. And so we are so excited, May 21st, and we are well underway to getting prepared for that. And so we just want to start getting the buzz going and that conversation surrounding the walk going again. I know that I have heard from so many people that they are so excited to once again be able to be in person, celebrating together, and just being in a community with other individuals who understand what it's like to experience mental health, as well as then to be in that stigma-free and supportive community. And so we are really looking forward to being back in action and in person. And so what we are asking of you all is to, again, get that buzz going and to register online at the link that I just put into the chat. And so for this year, since we are in person again, we're going to have teams just like we used to, as well as participants. And so we're really looking forward to getting as many people as possible excited and join us for the walk. Again, the main purpose of the walk isn't just the fundraising, but it really is about spreading that mental health awareness, getting that dialogue and that conversation going in North Texas about the fact that we are here, we are proud to stand next to each other, and we are working towards a stigma-free North Texas. And so one of the ways that NAMI is doing that is by gathering everyone that we can for the walk, and we want you guys to be a part of that. And so again, I will type some more info and put this info in the chat as well, but May 21st, mark your calendars and tell everyone you know and start getting really excited, because I know everyone on our team is so pumped about it and we're really happy to be back in person again. So thanks for giving me the floor for a bit, Chris, and I look forward to hearing more from Heather.
Absolutely. Thank you, Haley. Again, that date for the walk will be May 21st, and that will be at Rough Riders Stadium in Frisco, correct, Haley? All right. So it'll be May 21st. You can find more at namiwatch.org/North Texas, which is the link that Haley left for you in the chat. And you can go ahead and create a team. You can sign up on one of the teams that's already been created and go ahead and start getting the word out about mental health and mental health awareness and going for a walk around Rough Riders Stadium. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker for the evening, which is Heather Bianchi. She is a board-certified behavior analyst and a licensed behavior analyst, and she serves currently as the Executive Vice President for Behavioral Transformations. So this is a company that provides ABA therapy, speech therapy, and counseling for children diagnosed with autism in Rockwall and Kaufman County. So she is committed to help educate the community about the autism spectrum disorder and provide trainings, develop rescue teams for first responders and police departments in Rockwall and surrounding areas in regards to individuals with autism spectrum disorder. She's also passionate about educating families on insurance and funding requirements to help their children receive the services that are necessary for them that they wouldn't be able to otherwise without insurance. So Heather's a graduate of the University of Texas in Tyler. She has a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling and is working on becoming a licensed professional counselor. All right, so Heather, without further ado, I will turn it over to you, and you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? Okay, wonderful. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, I'm a board certified behavior analyst. I work with children across 7 clinics in Rockwall and Kaufman County. We serve the ages of about 18 months all the way to young adults. I think the oldest that we have right now is 22 years old. I can tell you more about like what ABA is as we get into it, but just a little bit about the background of how this came to be. I actually, I went to school, my graduate program was in Tyler, at Tyler, and I was actually going to be a licensed professional counselor, and I needed to work somewhere that would give me flexible hours, so I ended up in an ABA clinic. And in the graduate program for counseling, autism, it's a part of the DSM-5, but it's not touched on as much as you know, mood disorders and other things that you would learn about in your graduate program. And so I didn't know a lot about it. And I worked at this ABA clinic as a data manager. And then I started to see these kids and see them say their first words and see how their lives were changed with this. And I started to learn more about it. And I decided, you know what, this is pretty amazing. So I'm going to go ahead and see what I can do about going this route. So I did some continuing education with Florida Institute of Technology. And then tested, and here I am. So I've been at behavioral transformations for almost 5 years now. I started as a BCBA of one of the clinics, and then worked up to a clinical director position, which put me over 3 clinics. Then I became vice president of clinical operations, which put me over all the clinics. And now I'm executive vice president, where I am not only over the clinical aspect of things, but also the operations, which has opened my eyes to, you know, the world of, you know, some of the barriers that that families have gaining services, and, you know, just how all of this ties together. So that was just a little bit about me, but let's get to the part that we wanted to actually talk about, and that's autism spectrum disorder. So let's all cross our fingers that my share screen works so that I can get this up for you guys. Okay. See how it. What is showing on your screen? I'm not sure that, let's see.
Looks like we can see the PowerPoint.
Okay, let's get it going then. Haha, did that work?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I'm so proud. Okay, first time I've done that. Okay, so this presentation is on autism spectrum disorder. So I'm just giving like a really general overview over the symptoms and current supports and services that are available, you know, to those that are diagnosed. So this is very long, but we'll go through it. It's the actual DSM-5 diagnostic criteria for autism spectrum disorder, and we'll go through it. So in order to be diagnosed with ASD, so you have to have persistent deficits in social communication and social interaction across multiple contexts, as manifested as the following. So deficits in social emotional reciprocity, abnormal social approach, failure to have normal back and forth conversation, to reduce sharing of interests, emotions, or affect. So what this means, and what I've seen with our kiddos is autism is a spectrum. You know, it's in the name, but it's really hard to kind of gauge what that actually is. So the social emotional reciprocity is being able to perspective take, for one, to know that what hurts me hurts you also as well, to know that what I'm interested in talking about, or what my interests are not particularly your interests. Being able to have a back and forth conversation that lasts more than, hi, how are you? I'm fine. And really being able to talk on the fly is probably the easiest way for me to explain that. With kids on the spectrum, I do find often that they are really into interacting with adults, which causes that social deficit with their peers. And the reason why they're so interested in speaking with adults is that we have this ability to have a structured conversation. There's a topic and we can stay on that topic, and we can read off of people, and we can keep that conversation structured. Whereas whenever you're around kids, you know that the conversation could range from whatever their interest is in to all of a sudden Sonic the Hedgehog, and then all of a sudden something else. And so there's a lot of thinking on the fly, and that communication deficit does make it a little bit difficult for them to keep those conversations up. So on B, deficits in nonverbal communicative behaviors used for social interaction. So poorly integrated verbal and nonverbal communication. So this is where eye contact comes in. A lot of our kids have difficulty with eye contact to where if you call their name, sometimes they don't hear you, or they'll look away, or they may hear you and may respond, but they will not be actually making that eye contact. Then sometimes what we see is kind of a flatter affect. So when speaking with others, you tend to get a smile, you get the eye contact. There's a lot of like, oh, I'm actually, I'm very interested in what you're saying. With some of our kids with autism, they may not do any of that. It may be that they avert eye contact, they remain a flat affect, but they're hearing everything that you're saying and they understand. And it's just very difficult for them to engage in that nonverbal communicative behavior. And then deficits in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships. So with everything that I kind of went over before, you could imagine that would naturally follow. Having a really rough time engaging in social interaction, having that social emotional reciprocity, engaging in kind of flatter nonverbal behavior. Not everyone, and I'll explain that more, but that does create a difficult time being able to actually approach someone and say, hey, can we be friends? And then maintaining that friendship, even if they are able to broach that subject of like being friends and finding that shared interest, maintaining that friendship does become very difficult. With some of our kids that have great communication skills, but have some social deficits, sometimes they run into the issue of that perspective taking of, I'm your friend, you're my friend, why do you have this friend? Why do, you're my friend, so you should be spending your time with me. And just basically not being able to take that perspective that people can have many friends. People have a life outside of what you see in front of you. And so social communication is something that is a part of this in the diagnostic criteria. Next is restricted repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities. So that's where you see the stereotyped or repetitive motor movements, use of objects or speech. So this is the part of autism that I think gets the most attention. Most people, whenever they hear about autism or know at least a little bit about autism, you could say hand flapping or body rocking or something like that and people will associate that with autism. Not all of our kids have that repetitive motor movement. It really varies from child to child or adult to adult.
I love your audio. I can't hear you.
You can't hear me? Did I lose everybody?
Yeah, you froze.
Oh, I froze. Okay, where did I leave off?
The most important part. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay, Claudia. It may be on your end. I don't know about anybody else, but I didn't have the same issue. So
okay.
I didn't have the same issue either.
Yeah, mine was fine as well.
Mine was fine too.
I guess it was only me. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
It's all good.
That's good. Thank you for letting me know, though. Yes, stereotyped or repetitive motor movements. Like I said, those are the ones that receive a lot of the attention because that is the part that probably has the most social stigma. And people talk about, social stigma and everything. And like looking back in ABA, there was a time whenever it was very important to the field to reduce that social stigma. However, speaking to people with autism, speaking to adults with autism, we've gained a greater understanding of how that serves them. And it makes a lot of sense if you put it into the context of like me, for instance. Typically, whenever I give presentations, I do a lot of pacing. Now that I'm on this Zoom call, like I have to stay in one spot. And so you'll see that I use my hands a lot. I do a lot of gesturing. It does help me think. It helps me stay comfortable in the moment as far as giving the presentation. It makes me feel calmer. But the gesturing while talking is not socially stigmatizing. I mean, if it went, a bit bigger than it probably would. But it's not something that really you guys look at me and like, why is she doing that? Well, for these individuals with autism, it's the same thing. It just might not be what would be considered for socially appropriate. So the hand flapping, there's body rocking that can occur. And all that is helping them to think, help them to feel calm, help them feel safe in their environment. And, as Haley was saying, reducing that stigma, that's a big thing that I've been a proponent for, is to make sure that whenever we're working with kids with autism, that's something that we think about. Is it really fair to take away and like bind my hands to where I'm not gesturing? That would make me very uncomfortable in this moment. And it's something that we really need to think about with our individuals with autism. That's what makes them feel good in the world around them. So that's just kind of a soapbox for me as far as those repetitive motor movements. So there's also other things like lining up toys. That's definitely a big thing that a lot of people really bring up. And what's funny is that whenever people see kids line up toys, that's automatically where they go with it, is like, oh, maybe this child has autism. But it's actually a very functional play to line up your toys to where you can see them all and everything. It's whenever it becomes an issue, or maybe towards more of the diagnosis, if that's all that's being done with the toys. There's no actual play with the toys. There's no making animal sounds if it's like animals lining it up, and it's whenever it goes to another degree to where there is no actual functional play being had, it is lining up the toys and being done. On C, insistence on sameness and flexible adherence to routines or ritualized patterns of verbal or nonverbal behavior. So this is, we all like routine. Everybody likes routine. It's nice to know what to expect all the time. And that's the same with individuals with autism. Just sometimes it does go to an extreme. For example, in a lot of cases, I've had kiddos that, there is one way to come to the clinic. And so if you deviate from that way, if there's traffic, if the light isn't working, if there's construction, so we have to go a detour, it creates pretty extreme distress to where the child or, in other cases, adults, have a physical reaction to and express outwardly their displeasure on not going the routine. This is not the way to get there. I know how to get there. We take a right at the slide, and that's how we get there. And you took a left. And so now I don't even know what's happening in my world anymore. And so that's the insistence on sameness, or something that we call rigidity. There's other types of rituals that can be done. I have a kiddo that is very insistent on his rituals, and there for a time he did, before he crossed the threshold to through a door, he would kneel down and then touch his head to the ground, and he would do that before he went through any doorway. This did become a problem because that we had to work on, because it wouldn't matter if he was outside and it was raining and muddy and everything, he would have to get down and put his face in the mud, which of course, does create some issues. A lot of what I hear from families is insistence on the same meal. Now, anybody who's ever had a toddler knows that insistence on the same meal is something that that does happen with most children. It's just, again, going beyond that to where it's chicken nuggets for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and there is no eating anything else. Highly restricted fixated interests that are abnormal intensity or focus. There are sometimes whenever we have kids that have a specific toy and they carry that toy and they will have that toy everywhere with them all of the time. And it has to be that same toy. And where it becomes an issue is that, yes, kids like to have their blankies or their toys or whatever they would like, and keep it around with them everywhere. But if that toy breaks, oh, we buy a new one, it's fine, we'll replace it with something else. With some of our kiddos, they have such a focus on that particular toy that it creates extreme distress if that toy is no longer around. Something that doesn't last just 20 to 30 minutes of being sad about it, something that can last days and weeks of being highly distressed by losing whatever interest that is. Hyper or hypo reactivity to sensory input or unusual interest in sensory aspects of the environment. It's really like any of the senses can be affected by this. Bright lights can either have a child that wants to go towards the bright light, or a child that it really affects them deeply to have such a bright light in their eyes. Auditory input, that's a big one. Loud noises can be highly aversive. Then on the other end, there's also they're seeking that that high-pitched noise, where they might even emit those high-pitched noises themselves just to get that sensory input. So symptoms must be present in the early developmental period, and it may be masked by learned strategies in later life. So, autism spectrum disorder, it just became the spectrum disorder, when the DSM-5 came out, I think in 2013. And before that, it was split up into multiple diagnoses. So there was pervasive developmental disorder, there was Asperger's, and it was just falling into all of these different areas. And because we were still learning more and more about what autism is. And so since it came out in the DSM-5, it fell under this spectrum umbrella. And then we're seeing more and more adults, coming forward and be like, I was just diagnosed with autism, because it's something that they had experienced their entire life, that we're just now seeing is, that they actually do fit the diagnosis. And D is really important. So in pretty much all of the DSM-5 diagnostic criteria, it'll say something like this, but symptoms cause clinically significant impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of current functioning. Probably what a lot of families, come to me about, like, wondering if their child might have autism. I don't personally diagnose, but I can refer out to people who do. But they're like, my child, they're lining up the toys, and it really comes to the part: is it clinically significant? Is it creating a harsh impact on your child's life? Are they having difficulty functioning in school, functioning at home, functioning at the grocery store? Is it like severely impacting their life? And that is a big part of that diagnostic criteria. It's not better explained by any other delays. So let's go ahead and click over. Okay, so common misconceptions about autism spectrum disorder, and I hope that I get to stay on this topic for a little bit. So what does the autism spectrum look like? So there's a lot of talk about like high functioning, low functioning. That's really kind of old language from, you know, Asperger's. That's what they were attempting to do. It's like, okay, so high functioning is Asperger's, and then the rest can fall under fall under this umbrella. But that's not how autism really works. It is this was something, and I tried to find a graphic that actually had the copyright and the person who wrote it on here. It's not a spectrum in like a light spectrum where it goes light to dark, most autistic, less autistic. It's really like this circle, this gradient that you know, you can score super high on the language, but your motor skills are maybe middle of the road. Your perception may be close to the dot in the center, executive function somewhere in the middle. And each person with autism falls differently on this gradient. Not a single person will, not two people would score exactly the same on this gradient. Everybody has their strengths, everybody has their weaknesses, everybody has their skills, you know, everybody has their deficits. It's just a matter of how much it's impacting their life. So the common misconceptions about autism is that, for one, that you can see autism. Now, before I did talk about the repetitive patterns of behavior, like the hand flapping or something like that. Obviously, you can see that. But I've also heard in my career, oh, he doesn't even look like he has autism. Well, that's because autism is a neurodevelopmental developmental disorder. It is not a it's not something that presents itself physically. There's not a physical developmental aspect to it. It's not something that you can see. It's only if you know what symptoms you're looking for, that you would be able to see that over a period of time. And I'll talk more about being able to what it takes to be diagnosed, but that's why for a diagnosis, you can't just have like a 2-hour sit-in with the developmental pediatrician. It's usually done over 3 different sessions that are several hours long to actually be able to adequately diagnose autism. I already touched on this. It's another one of my soapboxes. Autism is comprised of high functioning or low functioning individuals. Like I said, everybody has their skill set that they're really high in, that they're a bit lower. I have kiddos that can speak, you know, sentences, and they know so much about their area of interest, and just as soon as something aversive comes in or some sort of social interaction begins to happen, it's as if they lost all of their words and have extreme difficulty in carrying on a conversation, even though you heard them speak so eloquently before. Whenever it was just one-on-one, as soon as they get into a group, it's like all of that falls away. And so they all have their strengths and their weaknesses. When an individual with ASD displays a skill, they will display that skill all of the time. Again, and like whenever I do my trainings for law enforcement and for for rescue teams, one of the things that I have them that I suggest that they ask parents is, you know, what's the level of communication? How responded are they? How do they do during stressful situations? Because you may have a child that responds to their name, can respond back, can speak well, and then whenever they're in a stressful situation, such as being lost, or in a situation where police are coming and they're stressed out, they may not respond. They may not respond to directives. They may not respond to their name. If they're lost, they may not be able to say, "Hey, I'm here." even though that skill set is in their repertoire, like they are able to say those things during those high stress situations, they just may not be able to do that all the time. Autism is an intellectual disability. That is a misconception. I've ran into this multiple times, personally with my nephew was actually diagnosed whenever he was 4 years old. You know, I had seen symptoms for a while, such as not communicating, not doing spoken word, I should say. And during social interactions, such as being at the splash pad, he wouldn't play with the other children. He would walk the perimeter of the fence. And he's just an amazing little boy. And my brother, you know, whenever he was diagnosed, came to me and he was like, but he's so smart. And I was like, he is. It's not an intellectual disability. It's really just those deficits in communication and socialization. And, you know, he does flap his hands, but it has absolutely nothing to do with how smart he is. Now, there are diagnoses of autism with an accompanying intellectual disability, but that is a whole other separate diagnosis. That can happen comorbidly, but autism itself does not mean an intellectual disability. This really plays into how society does treat children and adults with autism, especially if they have more muted speech, because I guess muted speech equates to they don't understand what I'm saying. And so people may speak however they want in front of this person, thinking that they're not understanding what's being said. Again, it's not an intellectual disability. They hear you, they know what you're saying. And so that's a very big piece of that I'd like the world to know as far as autism awareness is that, you know, they hear you and that they understand what's going on. Another misconception is those with autism display extraordinary savant-like skills. So kids and adults with autism are extraordinary. But the savant-like skills, such as the Rain Man movie and counting cards and all of that, that is not the norm. So we do have kids that will know a lot of information about a very specific topic. And before, whenever you saw the diagnostic criteria, you know, it said rigidity and fixed interests. And so if you have a fixed interest in something to where it's all you talk about, all that you look up, all that you read about, you're going to know a lot about that topic. And so it just plays into what the you know, into the diagnosis, their fixed interests. And so, you know, you may have a child that knows everything there is to know about space, but doesn't necessarily know, you know, about anything else as far as science is concerned. Now, I do have to say, you know, a lot of these kids do display some pretty amazing skills, such as I do have a kiddo that if he will ask you what your birthday is, that's his typical greeting. Instead of saying, hi, how are you? He will ask you when your birthday is. And he wants to know the date of your birthday. And he will tell you what day of the week that fell on. I was pleased to find out that I was born on a Wednesday. I didn't even know that. So I did look it up to check it. And he just apparently has this ability to, it has to be some sort of formula in his head in order to figure that out. But it's just, he's really fun. The last misconception that I have here, and there's lots of misconceptions, but these were the main ones that I wanted to discuss, is that autism can be cured. It is a lifelong disorder. Once you are diagnosed with autism, you're diagnosed with autism. It, again, is a neurodevelopmental disorder. It's about how your brain has developed, and it's not something that can be cured. There are a lot of things out there that, you know, parents like to try, which I don't blame them. You know, they want to try everything they can to help their child. But again, you know, autism itself is not something that can be treated out. So. All right. So I wanted to go through the procedure for gaining diagnosis. You know, in the event that anybody's interested as far as like, how do we even know? So, you know, children, they see their pediatrician for well child visits, and they're designed to screen for possible symptoms of ASD. The American Academy of Pediatrics actually put out to pediatricians the requirements for screening for autism. So it should be a part of every well child visit. Regular assessments are utilized for these screenings, such as the MCHAT. This is something that you can look up on your own, the MCHAT, to kind of read through what kind of things are asked, such as, does the child point? Has the child regressed in any language? And those types of things to screen for autism. And it's a free tool that's available online. If a pediatrician does suspect a child qualifies for the diagnosis, they refer to a qualified practitioner. Not just anybody can diagnose autism. A pediatrician cannot. They actually have to be a developmental pediatrician, which means that they go through extra classes, extra schooling in order to become a developmental pediatrician. Child psychologists, child psychiatrists, and pediatric neurologists are all qualified to do the diagnosis. They typically utilize parent caregiver interviews, direct observations that utilize the ADOS assessment. And so that's where they're looking and observing, how does the child speak? How is the child approaching? Is the child responding to their name? Do they have fixed interests? Are they exploring their surroundings? And then cognitive language assessments. So services. Services for those with autism, typically once they get the diagnosis, this would be all written out in their assessment evaluation write-up. Speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, ABA, and then psychological/psychiatric services. I would like everybody to note the website that I have down on the bottom right. It's dfwasd.com. It's a wonderful resource that we came across that it lists all providers in the DFW area for basically everything that you might need once the diagnosis is received, or even for those parents that are suspecting autism. It shows providers that can diagnose, providers that can treat, and also some support services for community supports, because and I'll talk about this some more. These families, I found whenever they do receive the diagnosis that their child has autism, there is, some stages of grief. It's a lifelong diagnosis. It's something that leaves a family in a state of uncertainty. How is my child going to function in life? Are they going to be all that they can be? Are they going to enjoy their life? And so there is some grief that comes along with that. And so I am a big proponent of treating the whole family because, everybody is going through it, together. So speech therapy. This focuses on communication or oral motor deficit. Typically, it's about 2 30-minute sessions weekly, but that varies. And it targets language. So right here, AAC, augmentative and alternative communication. These can be many things. So with our kiddos, they have a deficit in communication. So, and like I said before, it is a spectrum. So they can fall anywhere on that gradient as far as how well they communicate. So there are AAC devices that can assist a child in communicating, and speech therapists are the ones that determine what device would help them the most. So there are things called picture exchange communication systems. So if you ever see a child walking around in the grocery store with a book hanging around their neck with it's a big plastic book. Sometimes they're orange, sometimes they're blue, and they have just different pictures on Velcro on them. That's a picture exchange communication system. And what that is it allows for the child to request things and see so that they can express their wants and needs through pictures by pulling it off and handing it to their listener. So the same as saying, I want a cup of water, the child would have their book, pull off the water picture and hand it over to their caregiver to say, I need some water. There are also a multitude of devices out there, Dynavox, Proloquo. These are just brand names of and apps that children can use that are downloaded on iPads, and they actually speak for the child. So it can be pictures as well that's actually translated into spoken word. Or some of my kids actually use it to type in sentences of things that they want, because they do not have the ability to speak them out loud. They can type it into this communication device, press share, and then the device speaks for them in full sentences to communicate their wants and needs. And so that is the main thing that speech therapy focuses on as it relates to kids with autism, is that functional communication component. It's not communication just for the sake of communication. So what you'll see with speech therapists and also in ABA is that we're not going to be teaching manners first, much to the dismay of our Southern families. We don't teach please and thank you first, or sir or ma'am, because that's not functional. I can't walk up to someone and say ma'am and them know what I need. And so we have to teach the ability to communicate wants and needs and make communication functional first, and then we can work on the pleasantries. Then there's pragmatics, that's social communication, how to approach a social situation. That's something that's practiced in speech therapy. Articulation. So many times we have kiddos that have a difficult time articulating. So they're saying the word, their parents can hear what word they're saying through conditioning by knowing, you know, this is what my child says whenever they want this thing. But another listener may not be able to understand what that child is saying. It's like whenever you have a parent of a 2-year-old who points at something and says a word that you don't understand, and the parent's like, oh no, they want their biscuit, or they want the candy or something like that. But you know, just all throughout life. So they work on articulation as well. And then there's also feeding therapy. So with it, there may be multiple diagnoses, but as it relates to autism itself, with the restricted patterns of behavior with and their fixed interest with eating, sometimes that can lead to rejecting solid foods, especially early on. And so, you know, parents, you know, want to be able to get the nutrients in, and so they stick to the yogurts, they stick to the soft foods, the mashed potatoes, and all of those things. But what happens there is that the child doesn't develop the oral motor skills to chew, and so it actually starts to become an issue to where they can't actually step up to solid foods yet. And so feeding therapy is a big part of speech therapy. Onto occupational therapy and physical therapy. So physical therapy primarily targets gross motor activity. Now, you'll hear me say it a million times, so not with all kids, but with a lot of children with autism, there is a bit of, they may also be delayed in gross motor activity running, maybe a little bit more unsteady on their feet. So that's where physical therapy comes in. Occupational therapy, there's also some difficulty with fine motor skills. So they work on cutting the scissors, writing, any life skills, so dressing, being able to do the buttons, the zippers, grooming themselves, and then also, of course, toileting. And then ABA therapy, I could spend an entire hour just talking about this because it is my the biggest area of expertise for me. So what this is a BCBA creates this individualized program targeting the core deficits of autism, which of course we've already discussed. So what we do is we actually test the communication, we test the socialization with other peers, and we record data on the behavior. And then we create this individualized plan that's specific to the child on how to increase. So at the bottom, you'll see the behavior that we need to increase, skill acquisition behaviors, like, so what words are we going to learn? What social skills are we going to learn? And then we also have targeted behaviors for reduction. So something that's also a common misconception with ASD is that kids with autism can be violent. And while it is true that aggression happens, the way that I always like to frame it is they have a deficit in communication. So think back to that time that you stubbed your toe. What happened? You kind of limped on your one foot, hopping around. You may have said some choice words. You probably, let out a sound. And then what happened whenever you were seeing somebody else? You said, I stubbed my toe and it hurt. That's probably the nicest thing that you probably said was, this hurts. Oh, it hurts so bad. All of those things. Now imagine taking away all of that speech. And you have to get across to the other person how you are feeling. And so what we see with that, with these deficits, that's where we start to see aggression or even self-injurious behavior, hitting themselves in the head, hitting themselves in the leg, scratching themselves, picking, and aggression, hitting someone. And all that behavior is they're trying to communicate something to the other person. And so it's our job to identify what that behavior is, what function it's serving. Is it to gain access to something? Is it to escape something that they find aversive? Is it, it can be a number of things. And so we have to figure out why that is occurring, then teach them the communication or the appropriate skill in that place, and so that the aggression or the self-injurious behavior no longer serves that purpose, and the spoken word or the communicative device actually replaces that. So that is, in a very small nutshell, what we do in ABA, and it is highly intensive. So as I said before, like with the speech, occupational therapy, even physical therapy, they're in short sessions, about 30 minutes, sometimes 45 minutes, and they can even be an hour long. Our programs can either be comprehensive or focused. So focused is 25 hours or less a week. So I do have kids that attend only 4 hours a week. We're just focusing on social skills. That is literally all that we work on, all the way up to the 25 hours, but it's still focused in. Or there's the comprehensive. That's 26 to 40 hours a week. We have children that this replaces school because at the moment they are not able to communicate their wants and needs. They are not able to sit, attend, and learn any academics. And so school wouldn't be serving them in that regard. So they need something a bit more restrictive, a bit more intensive. And so that can be 26 to 40 hours a week. Okay. And then there's psychological psychiatric services. So the psychiatric services side, like most of my kiddos do see a psychiatrist for medication management. And there isn't a medication that is specifically designed for autism or to treat autism. It's more to treat the symptoms. So behavior reduction or something along those lines. And so there's many different medications that our kiddos are on, and they fluctuate. They need constant medication management. They need to see a psychiatrist often. I do have a kiddo that he has to, once there's an adjustment in his medication, that's whenever his behaviors really spike. As far as behaviors, I mean maladaptive behaviors, his aggression, his self-injurious behavior, they really spike whenever that happens. And so it's really important for all of these pieces to really coordinate together to treat the whole person so that we know what's going on and that we can treat them fully. Counseling services are recommended for individuals with autism that have the skills to communicate, because many of them have multiple diagnoses. With all of these deficits and the wants and needs of what any human being would have, you know, I want to have friends, I want to be social, I just don't know how, or I want to communicate these things, I just don't know how, I don't have that skill yet, can create a great deal of anxiety, depression. We have a lot of, you know, most of our kiddos, you know, they do have that diagnosis as well, because it's very difficult for them to go through life to where, you know, they have those repetitive patterns of behavior. And so their peers look at them as if there's something wrong with them and avoid them altogether, but they still have that want and need as a human being to connect. And so counseling services are recommended. What's unfortunate is there is that communication deficit. So there is a part of ABA out there that is combining with CBT to try and create something that can serve kind of merge the two practices, because what ABA lacks is that we're really focused in on behavior and what we can see and what we can measure. And you know, humans have feelings and they have thoughts and they have what we call internal events. So things that go on within here that you can't see, you can't measure. And so that's where counseling would come in. But then we have the issue of the communication deficit. So how do we merge the two? So there's actually something that is out there. It's called acceptance and commitment therapy. And it takes some principles of ABA and principles of CBT and merges them together. And it's a very new thing that's out there, but it's very exciting, and a lot of BCBAs are really jumping on board because, you know, we do want to be able to serve these children in the best way that we can. And then also, of course, family therapy is also recommended. It is, again, it's important to treat the entire family, really with any diagnosis. That is my outlook, is treating the whole family. But again, you know, you have parents that may be going through stages of grief. You have siblings where now, well, all of the attention has to be on little Johnny because little Johnny has this diagnosis, and I have to work really hard in order to get him to be successful in life. And so any other children in the house may feel a sense of being overlooked. You know, oh, mommy and daddy they're not spending as much time with me. And these are all very normal, real feelings, you know, that occur within a family. And so it's very important to make sure that everybody's involved in the treatment so that everybody can move forward with the diagnosis. So. All right, I tried my best to get through that in 50 minutes so that we could get to any questions. And please let me know if I went too fast for you guys. I can go over any more of this, or if there's another topic that anybody else has any interest in. excuse me, as it relates to autism, I would be happy to discuss anything that was not in the slides.
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, my name is Priscilla. I just so happened to look on the website and saw this, webinar that you're having today. So I really thought it was interesting. My son is going to have his ARD meeting, an ARD meeting on Monday, and they're going to do an evaluation and let me know if he does have autism. So this is brand new to me.
Okay.
He's 5 years old, and he's, his teacher recommended it. So I just didn't know, like I heard you say it takes a couple of times or it takes several sessions. However, I know the psychologist just saw him one time. So I just didn't know if he, like, if he did, it turns out that he does, if I should go and get another evaluation from someone else.
Okay,
If that makes
and so
sense.
the evaluation is through the school district?
Correct. Mhm.
Okay, so yeah, with the school district, it is a little bit different as far as the diagnosis. And the reason why that is because they are able to do direct observations via the teachers over several, that they'll have a lot of data over a long period of time. Whereas like outside of the school system, the developmental pediatrician has just met this child. And so it does take several instances so that they can make sure that they get more than just a snapshot of that. So yes. And so you have an ARD meeting. And so just to kind of give you a little bit of what to expect, what this will do is what will happen here, it does tend to be long. So what they'll do here is they will present their findings. If they find that he does meet the criteria for diagnosis, they'll let you know like what services are available. So I know within the school system, depending what school system your child is in, they typically do have a BCBA on staff or some sort of behavior support, speech therapy. I believe some employ OT as well. And so they would be able to offer some of these services to you. And I want to be very clear that I am not saying anything against school system, because I promise I am not. But if you do feel that there are, that they might be glossing over anything, if you do not feel completely heard, there are people, advocates out there that can actually attend your ARD with you to make sure that that your rights as a mother with a child, with a diagnosis under IDEA. So I just always say that to people that are going into an ARD meeting, because sometimes what's being said might not, it might not resonate. And so I just always like to let people know if there is a part that where you're confused on or anything like that, that there are people out there that can come with you to those.
Okay, how would I request something like that?
There is, let me see. I actually know of, one that, of an advocate that used to have a son with services with us. And so I don't have the website in front of me right now. But is there, how would I, Chris or Athena, how would I be able to get that information to Miss Priscilla? If I were able to get that information.
So everybody who registered for this presentation Part of the registration was their email address. So you get that information to me, I can get it to her.
Okay, fantastic. So what I'll do, Priscilla, is I will get that information and get that right over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course.
It's been very helpful.
Good. I'm glad to hear it.
One other thing I'll add to that, Priscilla, my son was diagnosed with on the autism spectrum at the age of 3, and we've already gone through the yard process and all of that. I don't know what school district that your child's in. I don't know if there's much differences between some school districts are better than others. I can tell you that there has been a lot of positive events with his development since attending the school and going through those classes. His attention span has become much more focused. He will respond and look at you as opposed to looking off in space and not acknowledging you. He is better. He still has some other issues that he's working on, but for being there in 1 year, there's been a lot of development and a lot of positive regard to that. So I just want to encourage you with that, that it's very scary at the beginning, but it's something that you will see a benefit to it.
Thank you. Yeah, he's in the Dallas district. And it's a little Montessori school. So I'm hopeful that there's going to be a lot of support.
And it sounds like in the Dallas school district, like I think that you're going to do great. So there's a question over here. If I know of any services and therapies for adult with autism. So yes and no. In the difficulty with treating adults with autism is funding. So in my bio, it talks about how I'm really big on educating people about insurance and their rights under insurance because it does, as children age, even getting up to the age of like 12, 13, it does become a bit of a battle sometimes with the insurance companies in order to pay for any services. And so with that, we do have, it is hard to find providers for adults because it just is so difficult. I do know, like, what I worked for Lakes Regional here in Rockwall. We served a multitude of adults with autism. So I would say probably looking at your local authority and everything to see if you got me like what like city you're thinking of, I could look into that and see what services I would be able to help you out with. And then so Claudia asked, I mentioned early on that children can be diagnosed as early as 18 months old. And actually, Claudia, I did attend a research presentation that they're starting to be able to diagnose at about 6 months old. And as far as like joint attention, so being able to actually, whenever a noise is made, do they orient themselves toward the noise? Obviously not making eye contact with anything, but again, that's early in the development, as far as early in the research. But at 18 months old, the early signs at that age is largely the communication deficit. So typically at about 18 months old, kiddos should have several words. They will not be able to be understood by strangers, probably for the most part, but there should be some words that are put together with multiple syllables like mama, dada, being able to say ball, bubble, those types of things that are that typically come out at around 18 months old. And so you don't typically get a lot of kids at 18 months old that are diagnosed, because the diagnosing providers are very hesitant to give a diagnosis at that age. They typically want to wait it out just a little bit before they give the confirmed diagnosis. So for instance, even like my own son, he did not have a lot of words at 18 months old. And so what they did was they diagnosed a speech delay, and he did catch up later on. So it has to be a very significant deficit in the communication at 18 months in order to warrant that diagnosis. All right, I think that's all the questions that I had in the chat. Did anybody have anything else?
I have some questions, Heather.
Okay.
I'll start with the really big one that everyone with autism never knows the answer to. What causes it?
So there is no one answer. So it is something that is being heavily researched. There's actually been the research surrounding it has found some causes, but it's not what causes everything. So there's a lot of research that backs women in areas that was heavy in the usage of DDT back whenever that was legal. That DDT actually stays in the environment for a very long time. And so they did find mothers that were in an area of high concentration of that did tend to have clinically significant higher levels of kids diagnosed with autism. Also, Fragile X syndrome is also a predisposition to being diagnosed with autism. There is evidence towards it being genetic in some cases, but not all. And so it's very piecemeal as far as like, what is the definitive cause for autism? Right now, all we can find is like, what's clinically significant, where are the higher levels, and trying to look at the environment to see like what variables could converge together to really determine that. You know, it's definitely been something that's evolved over the years as trying to figure out and pinpoint exactly what it is. And just if you're asking my own personal opinion, that does not represent BT, behavioral transformation, it really is a multitude of things. For instance, it could be a genetic predisposition that later on, you know, the fact that it's a communication and social deficit, and our entire world is disconnected as far as social interaction. Now our social interaction involves largely social media, where there's not the face-to-face contact and conversation and all of that, and lots of screens everywhere. Again, not saying that that's the cause. I'm saying that I feel like there is a multitude of things that probably come together to create that situation.
So I actually just have a follow-up question to that. Do you know if they've been able to identify any types of patterns? Like, for example, children that tend to have the inability, the speech delay, and then the inability to form speech throughout their entire life, they tend to have this common characteristic over here. Are they able to identify kind of patterns like that, or it's still just kind of kind of a cluster of it? There's so many different things that we can't really pinpoint anything.
So there's autism is whenever they diagnose, they'll give a level of severity. And I'm not a big fan of the level of severity because it's, to me, pretty subjective. But the level of severity is a level 1, level 2, level 3, level 3 being severely impaired. And so they do group them into kind of those buckets, but you can really move between those buckets, you know, with intervention. And so there isn't like a common ground as far as these kids exhibit these characteristics. But there is something out there that a higher number of children with autism get diagnosed with, and that's apraxia. And so that is, that's a different diagnosis that goes along with the diagnosis of autism, where it is difficult for a child to admit speech. And what will occur is you see the child attempting to say the word. So instead of saying, so we're trying to say the word T, and you see them and they're attempting and they're trying to get the T out. And then it comes out as da or something like that. You can see there's some sort of disconnect as far as the processing to the output. And so that's what apraxia is. And actually speech therapists, that's something that I didn't put on there, and I wish that I did. That's something that they, that several SLPs, speech language pathologists, go to extra courses and extra school for, is to treat apraxia itself, because it really is trying to retrain the brain to match up the output with the processing. And so we do see a group of those kiddos that have that extra diagnosis on top of it. But as far as like similar characteristics, as far as a predictor of being able to speak, that I don't have, I don't really have any common characteristics there.
Okay. All right. That was all I had. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Anybody else? This is fun. Ask all the questions.
Heather,
Yes.
we really, you know, are in the same position with no matter what mental illness you have, as far as saying, well, these things come together and 100% you're going to have, you know, what, bipolar, schizophrenia, whatever. No, we're not anywhere near anything like that. They have found some association with a couple of genes. But, you know, it's very frustrating. Say that, you know, mental illness does run in families. And so there is a genetic predisposition, but there are triggers that set them off too. And of course, we'd all like to avoid the triggers. But when a couple marries and that is a history in their family, and they try to figure out, well, should we have kids? I mean, will we have somebody, you know, that we can't take care of, or, you know, comes up with schizophrenia, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of us never had that conversation because we were so clueless. But mental health is leaping and bounding forward with lots of education and knowledge. And so now couples can look at their family tree and say, oh, well, my aunt has this and another one has this, and go to a doctor and say, well, what are my chances? And then act on that, you know, oh, well, if it's 50% or more, I don't think we should risk it. And so, you know, that's something futuristic that people can be horrified about, and may, you know, really strike families as the end of the line or so, whatever, you know, because they have the mental illness in there. But nobody knows exactly. You know, that's the frustrating part. If you could go in and do gene therapy or something like that, wouldn't that be great, you know, as part of your therapy or what, recovery. But unfortunately, you know, as you said, we don't know, and there may be several genes that interact. You know, they have about 2 at least for schizophrenia that I know of, but there's probably a lot more, and they all say that. So you are right in saying that we don't know, and it's very, very frustrating in a lot of different ways. So I just want to say, Chris, you're not alone in wondering how, why me? What happened here? And I know there can be a negative thought about, well, my genes turned against me. I don't want to, you know, inflict this on my family tree and what have you. And in the case that you do have one, like, a mentally ill child. So anyway, just to throw that in, there's no big conclusion to be made other than I wish we did know a lot more. Thank you, Heather. It's been very great.
Well, thank you. And yeah, I mean, would it be good to identify something? Yes. But as far as these kids, my nephew included, like, I wouldn't have them any other way. He's like, they're just, there's incredibly fantastic kids and young adults. And they are just, they're just kids. And it's really nice to be able to work with them and help them learn the skills that they need to become successful. And I love each and every one of them, and every single quirk and everything that that might come along with it. So they're really fantastic.
Well, you've certainly got the right attitude. You certainly have the right attitude, and it's not what is that? What was that futuristic thing like Galactica or something where your genes determined where you're going to be in society, which is kind of a horrible thought, but there are a lot of people with this kind of problem, more than we sometimes realize. And it's horrible when the kids come in with at an early age, and this, and then you have to think, what am I going to do? I mean, as a parent, what am I going to do? And NAMI is good about this. This is one of the organizations that helps you to cope with this. And I'm very bullish on NAMI because they have classes and things where your comfort level can be brought to a normal level, from being absolutely in crisis and not knowing anything and what to do, to being able to cope with it. So congratulations to NAMI. Thank you for your wonderful attitude toward the kids. That's the right way to go.
All right, folks, we've got about 5 more minutes. So last round of questions, 1, maybe 2.
I have a very naive question for you, Heather, and I'd like to preface it with my motivation for asking it, so it doesn't sound very stereotypical or anything like that. So part of the mission of NAMI is, in the awareness and advocacy component, is to help the community understand that people with mental illness do not have to be scary. There is a spectrum, within all of the mental illnesses in relation to how they function in society. But everybody can have a happy, healthy life with, the proper treatments, environment, support system, all of that. So that's where I'm coming from on this. And so in relation to autism, I think The Good Doctor, that television show, is trying to do something good in relation to saying, hey, people on the autism spectrum, even when they're, in the more severe cases, can be functional, can become a surgeon, a really amazing surgeon. So the question is are they portraying something that is, are they sensationalizing? Are they portraying something that, at that level of autism, can it happen? Can someone have such a high level career? Are they giving people false hope?
No, absolutely. They can have that high level of career. I'm very certain that if you go to NASA, you will find many, many people diagnosed with autism. Engineers, so I have to confess, I've never seen The Good Doctor, so I don't know how it's.
I had a feeling that you'd probably be like, I don't even want to know.
No, it's
what they're trying to do with it and how accurate it is.
Yeah, I do largely avoid those types of shows just because I don't want to know. But no, as far as I mean, yes. Imagine like before, whenever I was telling you about the fixed interests, you know, that is something like, again, it's a spectrum. So just because somebody has a fixed interest doesn't mean that they're not going to be interested in other things, but they may be really zoned in on this particular area. And so if that particular thing is engineering, they're going to be pretty darn good, you know, at that. And it's not just about that. It could be that you have a typically functioning child that becomes a typically functioning adult with autism because they have a very severe socialization deficit. So public speaking is not an option, and they might come off as awkward at dinner parties, so they avoid them altogether. You know, and honestly, just everywhere in between. You know, with all of our kids, I believe that they can be successful. Now, typically, whenever you see severe autism to where they may not be as successful, is there's probably more diagnoses along with that. Like you'll have multiple that affects much more about the individual. So.
And that's helpful. I wish I had known you. I worked several years at California Institute of Technology, and this was back when they were still talking about high functioning and Asperger's. We worked closely with the counseling center, and they estimated that at least 60% of the Caltech students had what they called Asperger's, and over half of them were undiagnosed Asperger's. And it was really interesting. My background was on intercultural communications, and I taught other people how to communicate and understand where that person is coming from. And then all of a sudden I'm put in this world where you have to be, you've got engineering, high, you know, percentage of autistic students, and you really have to be very linear and logical and very precise in your language. And it was a very interesting intercultural experience.
I know that we have to leave, but I have to tell this story. One of my sweet boys, I love him so much. He actually kind of graduated out of the program. He's doing fantastic. He was working with a therapist, and the therapist said, "If you get this right, I'll give you $1 million." And he got it right, and then became extremely angry whenever he did not get $1 million, because it's a very, you know, sometimes it's very concrete, it's very literal. If you say, let's hit the road, that means that we are about to go like punch the road. And it can come across as just very, very literal. So yeah, I'm sorry, I had to tell that story. Love that guy. Yeah.
Should have given him $1 million Monopoly dollars.
Right, for sure.
All right, so we are at 8:30, so we will go ahead and stop the recording.